radio or TV or anything else. A friend of mine who runs a infomercial company out of New Jersey brought us in to work with her a number of years ago from the understanding that infomercials used to work based on calling in an 800 number, right? You'd call in an 800 number, and that would represent about 80% of their sales. Around 2010, most infomercials dropped off down to about 30% of all sales would come in from the 800 number. And so there's a big question at that point whether or not infomercials and 800 numbers, Nathan, could work. And so what we researched and what we found was that the infomercial would generate traffic, would generate interest, right? And that traffic and interest would go towards Amazon and Google and Facebook and Twitter, and that the infomercials that didn't own being able to sell their inventory on Amazon would lose out on a massive amount of revenue. In fact, there were a lot of companies that would watch infomercials and see who ran an infomercial that didn't have a product on Amazon and would create competitive products with very similar names to be able to draft off of the work that the infomercial was doing. In fact, I know of, in one case, a skin line that had a huge, a very successful infomercial campaign where they generated about $150,000 of revenue a week. And they were not available on Amazon because the owner of the company thought, well, if we put it on Amazon, we're going to lose out on all of these sales because we have control over upsells and other things in the call center. And there's a competitor company that came in, named the product with a one-letter difference that ended up generating almost $500,000 a week in revenue off of their infomercial advertising, right? And so what we know to be true is that if you want to leverage and take advantage of the advertising and marketing that you're doing, you can't just be found in one place. You have to be able to be accessible to your audience in multiple different formats so that the customer can find out about you and your customer base in the medium that they choose to work from, right? So, the way that we answer the question of quantity and quality is what we call agile publishing. This is where the concept of the book outlining process comes in, because the goal is, if you're an influencer or you sell information or you're a thought leader, then you are an expert. You know your material. And the question is, what is the most rapid, quickest, most efficient way for you to be able to create content? And so this is why we created within our company the platform in a box system with book outlining, where we take the outline, do the videos, do the podcast, do the blog post, do the social media post and beyond, because our objective is to be able to, as rapidly as possible, create the content. If you go through that outlining process with us, whether you go to Chris's studio or you work with us or do it on your Mac, after you're done with the detailed outline, you should be able to sit down and create 64 videos. And that'll take, if they're 5 to 7 minutes, depending on how professionally you're filming, that could take 3 days to a week for you to film. At the end of that, you've created the vast majority of the content that you need for the front end of your platform, right? This is why we call it agile publishing, because what you've done is you've created, within a systematic format, you've created the content for 64 videos for YouTube, right? And to back out really quick, we point out that in building a platform, you look at 3 different things: traffic, engagement, and conversion, right? And so those are the 3 things that we look at: traffic, engagement, and conversion. Well, traffic is easy. Traffic is any time that you share a message with someone else. It's any time you buy an ad, radio, TV, or anywhere online. That's traffic. Conversion is when you get someone to take an action. That action could be to opt in for something, it could be to share something, it could be to comment on a blog post, it could be to buy something. Those are all forms of conversion, right? So engagement then is the in-between. This is where you put out social media posts and blog posts and YouTube videos and podcasts and all of those things. And so when we do that, this agile publishing, when we go through this outlining process, once the outline is done, as an expert, getting in front of a camera, filming your 64 videos is easy. Then whether you're using a Mac, because there are tools on Macs that will allow you that come innate with a Mac, which is why I like Macs, that allow you to strip out the audio and put in your bumpers at the beginning and the end to create podcasts, video podcasts, and audio podcasts. Easy thing to do. There are fairly inexpensive services for transcribing audio. So transcribing the audio into blog posts is not a difficult thing to do, right? And then editing that into a blog post is not a hard thing to do. So when we do, as an example, our platform in a box, we literally create an entire platform, a website, the 64 videos, the 64 podcasts, the 64 blog posts, the book, the social media posts, and the memes in less than 6 weeks. That's agile publishing. That's creating, at minimum, enough content for a quarter if you're putting content out 4 or 5 times a week, if that makes sense. And so what we're looking at when we look at publishing is making sure that you as an expert both know your material, but second to that, that you have a model and a system to be able to put out that content at a very rapid rate. So agile publishing means the rapid delivery with equally rapid feedback. The great thing about the internet, unlike traditional media, is that we get feedback from our customers, and that we can make changes and adjustments to what we're creating based on that feedback. One of the things that used to be with writing a book is that people would lock themselves away in an ivory tower for 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, write the book, publish it, and hope that it would be successful. We don't need to do that anymore. We have the ability, through a process like what we do with the outlining process, to be able to create the content and test it against our audience. It's why we do, for those of you that have gone through it, 16 subjects and not 9 or not 12, because we know at the end of the day, we're not going to use all of that content that we've created. We're going to find things that people are interested in that we didn't expect, and we're going to find things that we thought people would be interested in that they're not interested in. It also means a short development and redevelopment cycle. So we have clients that we work with that go through this platform in a box system, or what we call market bites, every quarter, because they know that they need to be constantly producing content on blogs and social media and podcasting and videos and beyond, and that they need to be doing some form of launch, whether that's a book, an ebook, or an online product, that they need to be doing that on a continual basis to both deepen the relationship with their audience and to keep them engaged. And then it's the ability to pivot based on the editing without loss of momentum, energy, or esprit de corps. So why now? Because agile publishing ain't agile without rapid content creation. Now, in the larger world, the marketing opportunity for our businesses is currently a $4.8 billion market. That's the size of marketing automation. The opportunity, what is the opportunity? The businesses that use marketing automation to nurture prospects experiences a 451 increase in qualified lead. And when we say nurture leads, we mean not only as they come in, but in the planning that we do. This is why at these events we teach persona architecture and the 12 steps of intimacy, because what we want to do is plan the customer experience far enough out that they're feeling seen and heard by us. Those of you that have gone through 12 steps know that's a big part of what we talk about. So some of the things that we know is that 50% of qualified leads are not ready to purchase immediately. It doesn't matter what you're selling. It could be clothing, it could be personal development, it could be sales, training, it could be a technology that they need. 50% of respondents have not realized the value of their marketing automation, and most thought leaders can't keep up with content demands created by inbound marketing and the news cycles. And that was from GleanServe. That was based on an actual study that they did. So everyone wants to automate the delivery of content. What we do here at our events is automate its creation. We do this through, as you see, our book outlining process, persona architecture. One of the things that we'll get into at some point is what we call brand diamonds. Some of you have heard me talk about the fact that in literature there are only 12 male characters and 12 female characters that we see throughout. We see this with Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, and he talks about the masculine journey and the masculine personas that are represented in literature. But literally there are only 12 caricatures of people in literature and art, 12 male and 12 female. And they represent, there's a yin and yang for all of that. And what we look at when we do brand diamonds is the concept of the fact that marketing and sales is never based on nuance. It's not based on gray, it's based on black and white. It's why John Kerry and Mitt Romney were not electable, because they can be right, but the average IQ, I point out all the time, is 100, the median's 85, mentally handicapped starts at 79. 50% of the population has an IQ within literally 6 points of mental handicap, And the rest of us are lazy. I'm lazy personally. There's things I should do all the time that I'm lazy about. I'm just lazy. So most people are lazy and not particularly bright. And so when we try to create a recognizable brand, you simplify or oversimplify into 3 or 4 key traits that is recognizable. This goes back to the 12 male and female persona archetypes that exist. So the example that I always ask is, if you've seen the TV show House. House is based on a very long-term historical character. And we could look at the brand diamond characteristics of House, and we could probably figure out who he would be, what character he would be based on. So we look at him, he's a narcissist. He's what, an opiate addict or a drug addict. He's a diagnostic technician, and let's see what else, Nathan, what was the fourth? He's brilliant, he's bright, okay? So what other character in literature, in the history of literature, has those same traits? Sherlock Holmes, right? Holmes' house, so they actually literally created the series to emulate Sherlock Holmes, but in a medical environment. Sherlock Holmes' best friend's name was, and House's best friend's name was? Wilson. Yeah, it was Wilson, right? House and Holmes, it's the same. A house and a home is the same thing, right? So we see this in literature, and so what we'll teach at a future event is how to create a brand diamond that is recognizable to your audience every single time, and that is very clear. And it's about the elimination of nuances and choice. That's interesting on sound. Like I said, we're having fun testing things out here. We got no sound, guys. Woohoo! Oh, there we go. I can hold it up here, and now we got some sound. Of course, 12 Steps of Intimacy, which is about understanding the depth of the relationship with the customer and how to keep that intimate and not being pickup artists and douchebags. And that all leads towards what we do with rapid content creation. Without agile and automated content creation, most marketing automation will fail. Most small companies don't have in-house writing, creative talent, and this is largely solved through agile content. Most companies haven't automated their marketing process, and again, we solve this in an authentic way with persona architecture and the 12 Steps of Intimacy, and most thought leaders lack the proper platform to capitalize on their content. So we create great content, but you have to have a way to be able to continue to deepen the relationship with your audience. Their problem is your opportunity as business owners, influencers, and thought leaders. You have a unique opportunity to be able to influence others in your space, unlike other competitors that you have. So what we've done at Profluent is create a turnkey solution. What we're teaching here is, and what we teach at these events on Wednesday night, is how to build a marketing platform. What everyone wants is to have their voice be seen and heard. As Kevin Spacey said, the audience wants to control. They want freedom. Give people what they want, when they want it, in the form they want it, and they'll be more likely to buy it than steal it, is what he said. And so what every business is looking for is voice. And what we are here, Profluent, and what we teach at these events is voice. And we are masters at identifying and codifying an individual organization's core voice. What makes them new, surprising, and different. Some of you might recognize that as the big idea. And we have a system to find and share that voice. So what business does not need these 3 things? 1, to codify their story, to test their message, and build and grow an audience. Industries that need this, of course, would be people like thought leaders, politicians, religious leaders, and business owners. Now, what's interesting is that most of us in this room were raised watching shows like Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And my daughter was raised watching Blue's Clues, Dora, The Explorer, and Diego. I know that shows today for parents with even younger kids are even different. But what's interesting about that, we've all heard the analogy that today's audiences have the attention span of goldfish, which is true because of what they've been watching. What we were raised on with Sesame Street, we had a state change, meaning they did a camera change, and even with what we're doing here, we're doing constant, when it's working, we're doing constant state changes because our attention span is low enough that if we don't, we lose everyone's attention. But when we were raised watching Sesame Street, state changes happen every 24 to 27 seconds. meaning they would have one scene with one camera on one place for 24 to 27 seconds. Shows today do a state change every 4 to 7 seconds, which is what's retraining people to consume content in shorter and shorter formats. It's just the reality of where we're at. So again, with that, with quantum media, what we need to look at is how we produce content and put it out. We want to look at short form content, meaning think about a social media post or short form or micro even, right? To mid form, that could be blog post, to long form, which could be an hour-long podcast or a white paper or any other point of content that is long form. Now, I love this. We call this the sunflower presentation because it kind of describes viscerally what happens when customers are hearing about us and engaging with us for the first time. It's kind of like bees looking for pollen. So they might hear about you or your business on radio. And they might, this goes back to my example with the infomercial. They might go from radio to YouTube, from YouTube, they might go over to Facebook, from Facebook they might go to your blog, find out more about you, sign up for your newsletter, buy a product, buy a book, or they could go from TV to LinkedIn, back to your blog. I mean, the experience of the customer is always based on how they perceive where the pollen is. And so what we're doing here at these events is helping build a community that allows us to build these types of platforms together and in support of each other so that we can go out and make a change. One of the things I want to point out, and we'll go more into this after the break, our objective in Profluent is to have an impact, a definable impact on 486 million people throughout the world. And we don't do that ourselves. We do that through serving you. We do that through our ability to help you take your voice and amplify it and have an impact on other people. And so when we build this community, our objective isn't to sell a service, isn't to necessarily even entertain. Our objective is to help each one of you have the tools and systems to be able to go out and have an impact on other people's lives so that we can hit our objective of impacting the lives of 486 million people. Right? That is our selfish objective, is we want to change the lives of that many people, because we know when we influence the lives of 3% of the population, we will change the population. We will change the mindset of the population. So that's what we're about. I understand that the people online have had a better experience with the technology than the folks here, so I appreciate all of your patience. The folks online, unfortunately, won't get the next part, which is going to be a community conversation about how we can work together to be able to build this community and support each other. So we're going to take a quick 10-minute break for dessert, and then we'll cut off online, and we'll come back and have just more of a community group conversation.